Welcome to part 2 of the How to Start a Podcast video series. In the first video, we covered the equipment and software that you need to get started, and we actually went through some of my personal recommendations that produce really great quality podcasts without spending a whole lot of money. If you haven't yet checked out that video or you still are undecided as to which equipment and software you need, make sure you go check out part 1 of the How to Start a Podcast video series. In this video, in part 2, we're actually going to be talking about how to record and edit our podcast, and we are going to be using some of the software discussed in the last video. So when you're ready, let's dive right in. So now that we're actually in Zencastr, this is where we're going to create our new podcast episode. So we come in here and I'm going to click New Recording, and it will load up a brand new project. Now, if you have a guest, this is where you can actually invite your guests to come into the chat room. I recommend using something like Calendly or Meetingbird that you can actually send your guest, and then you can actually paste the link that's here on Zencastr right into that meeting invite. Then your guest can go directly to that link when it's time to record your podcast, and you're good to go. Now, before we actually begin recording, we want to make sure that our microphone and our headset are actually connected. So here you can see that there are waves moving. That means that it's picking up my voice, but we want to click up here in the settings to make sure that it's picking up my voice from the microphone and not the desktop. Now, I would recommend you check this setting every single time you go to record. I have actually recorded an entire episode thinking it was coming through my mic, and it was actually coming through the microphone on my desktop audio, which sounded terrible. So definitely go in and check that setting before you begin recording. So we can see here it's picking up my Samsung Q2U microphone, which is good. My audio output is my Samsung Q2U microphone. I have my headphones plugged right into the microphone there, so that's all good. And we are going to save settings. Now we're actually ready to begin recording. Once you're ready, you hit start record. And now our podcast is recording. If you have a guest, Zencastr will actually record your audio and your guest's audio on separate tracks. This will make it much easier when you go to edit your podcast. So once the episode is done, we'll hit stop recording. Recording the podcast is that simple. And I go back in and I record my intros and outros after I conduct the interview. And I will actually come right back into Zencastr and I just record everything right through Zencastr. Zencastr actually links to Google Drive. So this file is actually getting saved into Google Drive. You can see my recording 2 that we just did, and then we can download that file. Now that our podcast episode is recorded, now it's time to actually edit that podcast. To do that, we are going to use Adobe Audition. This is my preferred program. If you're not quite ready to spend the money on the editing software, you can always use something like Audacity or GarageBand. Both those programs are fully functional and will be able to accomplish a lot of the same stuff that we're going to be talking about when it comes to editing the podcast. So let's jump into Audition here, and we will need to copy over our test audio that we just recorded. And if we click and open that up, you can see the full waveform here. And I actually have a little preview window showing so you can see before the effect and after the effect that we add. Now, you'll come in and you'll listen through your podcast episode and cut out anything you don't like. You can just highlight and delete. Maybe this section, maybe I used a lot. So we're going to delete out the ums, delete out the spaces, clean it up a little bit. When it comes to editing the podcast, there are a couple different things that I do. For the sake of this video, I'm not going to go real in depth as to why I do what I'm doing. This is just the series of settings that I play with that have given me the best results so far. If you'd like to see me go more in depth on the actual editing process, let me know in the comments down below and I'll make a separate video for that specifically. So we're going to start adding the effects to our audio recording. I'm going to come in here, and the first thing I'm going to do is add compression. So I add my compressor, and you can see how the waveforms have actually changed from the original to after the effect down here. So I'm going to apply that effect, and it changes it up on top. Then I come in, and I will add in filter and EQ. I will add a parametric equalizer. This is where I'm actually able to bring out some of the deeper frequencies and the higher frequencies, and it just makes my voice sound a little bit crispier. So I hit apply, and that effect is now added. And then finally, I come back in and I add one more compression. And you can see from the preview window that it gets rid of a lot of the spikes in the audio waveform. So I actually hit apply there. And now our audio file is looking pretty good. Now that our podcast episode is edited, we need to export this as a MP3 file because that is what we'll actually use to get our podcast uploaded and out to all the directories. So we'll save this one. Oh, we'll rename it. Rename it test 1 or test 2. And click OK. The MP3 file that we export is actually going to be what we upload to our podcast host when we get to that step. So now you should have your first episode recorded and edited. Now it's time to get that podcast episode pushed out to the various directories and apps like Spotify and Google and Apple. In part 3 of the How to Start a Podcast video series, I'm going to be showing you how to set up a Buzzsprout account, which is my personal recommendation for a podcast host, and how to get your episode uploaded and pushed out to all those apps and directories. There'll be a link to Buzzsprout down in the description below. Just know I am an affiliate for this product, so if you use that link, I will get a small commission at no additional cost to you. If you end up choosing Buzzsprout, you can choose whether or not you want to use that link. The choice is really up to you. If you liked this video and you thought it was helpful, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click that little bell so that you get notified when the new videos are released. Now let's jump over to part 3 of the How to Start a Podcast video series and get your podcast episode out into the world.